If you've ever watched someone you love get humiliated in front of a room full of people, you know the kind of anger that burns slow and deep. That night, as the chandeliers sparkled above us and the city's elite sipped champagne, I watched my mother turn my fiancé into a punchline, and I realized for the first time that sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who want you to feel the smallest. It started with a whisper, the kind that travels faster than sound in a room like that. My mother, immaculate in her designer gown, leaned into her circle of friends and said, "Watch this. He's about to embarrass himself." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my eyes on Ethan, who stood at the edge of the auction stage, hands folded, calm as ever. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the ballroom. "Next up, lot 17, the old Harrington property. Opening bid, $1. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. The Harrington house was a joke, a crumbling relic on a forgotten street. The kind of place you'd expect to find ghosts, not dreams. My mother's friends exchanged glances, their smiles sharp as glass. Ethan raised his paddle. $1, he said, his voice steady. The laughter grew louder. My mother didn't miss her cue. She stood, her voice ringing out clear and cold. $1? You can't even buy bread for that. Are you sure you can afford it, Ethan? Or will you need to borrow from my daughter again?" The room erupted. I saw heads turn, eyes widen, hands cover mouths to hide smirks. I wanted to disappear. Ethan just smiled, unfazed, and nodded at the auctioneer. "Any other bids?" The auctioneer called, but no one answered. Why would they? The house was worthless. Everyone knew it. My mother sat down, triumphant, her friends congratulating her on her wit. "Sold to the gentleman for $1, the auctioneer announced, giving Ethan a respectful nod. I saw something flicker in his eyes, something I couldn't name, but it made my heart race. As the gala continued, my mother made sure everyone knew the story. "My future son-in-law, the beggar," she said, laughing as she sipped her wine. "He's always looking for a handout. I suppose he thinks marrying my daughter will solve his problems." I tried to defend him, but she waved me off. "You're too soft, darling. You need someone who can provide for you, not someone who collects scraps." I looked at Ethan across the room, talking quietly with the auctioneer. He caught my eye and smiled, a secret smile just for me. I wanted to run to him, to tell him none of this mattered. But I stayed where I was, trapped by my mother's expectations and the weight of 100 watching eyes. Later, as the gala wound down and the guests began to leave, the mayor arrived. He was a tall man with a booming laugh, the kind of person who made everyone feel important. He shook hands, posed for photos, and finally made his way to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, his voice commanding attention. "Before you go, I'd like to acknowledge the new owner of the Harrington property. Ethan, would you join me?" Ethan walked to the stage, calm and collected. The mayor shook his hand, then turned to the crowd. "Some of you may not know this, but the Harrington house is more than just an old building. It's a piece of our city's history, and tonight it's found a new steward." My mother rolled her eyes, whispering to her friends, "A steward of ruins, more like." The mayor continued, "What you may not realize is that the Harrington property includes not just the house, but the entire block. The city has been looking for someone with vision, someone who understands the value of history and community. Ethan has pledged to restore the street, to bring new life to a forgotten part of our town." A hush fell over the room. My mother's smile faltered. The mayor turned to Ethan. "And as a symbolic gesture, the city agreed to sell the property for $1, a tradition dating back to our founding. It's not about the money. It's about trust and about honoring our past." Ethan nodded, his eyes shining. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm honored to take on this responsibility." The mayor clapped him on the back. "We're lucky to have you." The crowd erupted in applause, but my mother sat frozen, her face pale. I saw the realization dawn in her eyes. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a humiliation. This was something bigger, something she hadn't seen coming. As the applause died down, the mayor turned to my mother. "And I believe, Mrs. Carter, you grew up on that very street, didn't you?" She nodded, her voice barely audible. Yes, number 14. The mayor smiled. Well, you'll be pleased to know that Ethan has already spoken to the city about preserving the homes, including yours. He wants to make sure the people who live there can stay, as tenants, while the restoration takes place. My mother's mouth fell open. The room was silent, every eye on her. Ethan stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. I didn't buy the house to embarrass anyone. I bought it because I believe in second chances. For places and for people. I watched as my mother struggled to find her words, her confidence crumbling. For the first time, she looked small, uncertain. I felt a strange mix of pity and pride. That night, as we left the gala, Ethan took my hand. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded, tears in my eyes. I'm more than okay. I'm proud of you. He smiled, squeezing my hand. I did it for us. For our future. The car ride home was quiet, but not the uncomfortable kind of quiet. It was the kind where you can feel the world shifting, like the ground is settling into a new shape beneath your feet. I kept glancing at Ethan, searching his face for any sign of regret or anger, but all I saw was calm. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently on my knee, as if to remind me that we were in this together, no matter what my mother or anyone else thought. When we pulled up to our apartment, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding all night. How did you know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How did you know the house was more than just that? Ethan smiled, a little sheepish. I didn't at first. I just had a feeling. I've always loved old buildings, you know that. But when I started looking into the Harrington property, I found out it wasn't just a house. It was the key to the whole block. The city's been trying to find someone to take it on for years, but no one wanted the responsibility. When I realized your mom grew up there, it felt like fate. I shook my head, still trying to process everything. You could have told me. He squeezed my hand. I wanted to, but I knew your mom would try to stop me if she found out. She's always seen me as less. I wanted to prove to her, and to you, that I'm not just some charity case. That I can build something real. I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling the tension drain from my body. You didn't have to prove anything to me. I've always believed in you. He kissed the top of my head. I know. But sometimes you have to show people what you're made of. Not for them, but for yourself. The next morning, the news was everywhere. Local man buys historic block for $1, the headlines read. There were photos of Ethan shaking hands with the mayor, of my mother looking stunned in the background. My phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, co-workers, even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years wanted to know the story. Some congratulated me. Others wanted gossip. A few just wanted to know if it was true. My mother, on the other hand, went silent. For the first time in my life, she didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up unannounced. I knew she was reeling, trying to figure out how to spin the story, how to regain control. But the truth was out, and there was no taking it back. A week later, Ethan and I visited the Harrington house together. The street was quiet, the houses lined up like old friends, each with its own story to tell. We walked hand in hand, imagining what the block could become. A place for families, for laughter, for new beginnings. When we reached number 14, my mother's childhood home, I stopped. The house looked smaller than I remembered from her stories. The paint peeling, the porch sagging, but there was a warmth to it, a sense of history that made my heart ache. Ethan squeezed my hand. Do you want to go in? I nodded and he unlocked the door. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memories. I wandered from room to room, picturing my mother as a little girl, running down the hallway, hiding under the stairs, dreaming of a life bigger than this street could offer. In the living room, I found an old photograph tucked behind a cracked mirror. It was my mother, maybe 8 years old, grinning at the camera with a gap-toothed smile. I traced her face with my finger, wondering when she'd lost that innocence, that joy. Ethan stood beside me, silent. Finally, he spoke. I want you to know I'm not going to force your mom out. She can stay as long as she wants. All the tenants can. I just want to fix the place up, make it safe, make it beautiful again. I nodded, tears in my eyes. Thank you, I think she needs this. Maybe we all do. That afternoon, we met with the city planners, the restoration team, and a few of the neighbors. Ethan listened to everyone, taking notes, asking questions, making sure every voice was heard. He wasn't just buying a house, he was building a community. As the weeks passed, the project took shape. The houses were repaired, the gardens replanted, the streetlights fixed. People started to smile again, to wave when they saw us. My mother at first kept her distance, but slowly she began to thaw. She invited us for tea, asked about the renovations, even offered advice on paint colors. One evening, as the sun set over the newly restored street, my mother stood on her porch watching the children play. She looked at me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. I was wrong about him, she said quietly. He's not a beggar. He's a builder. I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my heart. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. She nodded, her gaze lingering on Ethan as he helped a neighbor carry groceries inside. Maybe he's the best thing that ever happened to all of us. The night air was cool as we walked home, the streetlights casting golden pools on the sidewalk. I glanced back at the row of houses, now glowing softly, and felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. For the first time, the past didn't feel like a weight pressing down on me. It felt like a foundation, something solid to build on. Ethan slipped his arm around my waist. You know, I never imagined any of this when I raised my hand at that auction, he said, his voice low and a little awed. I just wanted to prove I could do something meaningful. I didn't expect to change a whole street. Or a family. I smiled, leaning into him. You changed more than that. You changed me. You showed me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe in someone when no one else will. He stopped and turned to face me, his eyes searching mine. I couldn't have done any of it without you. When your mom laughed at me, when everyone thought I was a joke, you stood by me. That meant everything. I thought about that night at the gala, about the sting of humiliation and the way Ethan had stood tall, refusing to let anyone else define his worth. I realized then that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about standing together when the world tries to pull you apart. A few days later, the mayor invited us to a small ceremony on the newly restored street. Neighbors gathered, children played tag on the fresh grass, and the city's oldest residents shared stories about the block's history. My mother arrived, dressed simply, her usual armor of pride replaced by something gentler. She hugged me, then surprised everyone by hugging Ethan too. The mayor gave a short speech, praising Ethan's vision and determination. It's easy to laugh at a $1 bid, he said, glancing at the crowd. But it takes real courage to see value where others see nothing. Tonight we celebrate not just a restored street, but a renewed sense of community. As applause rippled through the crowd, my mother stepped forward. She cleared her throat, her voice trembling just a little. I owe my daughter and her fiancé an apology. I let my pride get in the way of seeing what was right in front of me. This street was my childhood, and I thought I'd lost it forever. But thanks to Ethan, it's alive again. And so is our family. There were tears in her eyes as she looked at me, and for the first time, I saw her not as the woman who'd tried to control my life, but as someone who was finally ready to let go of the past. After the ceremony, we walked her home. She paused on her porch, looking at the house she'd once called her own. I never thought I'd be a tenant in my own childhood home, she said with a wry smile. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe it's a chance to start over. Ethan grinned. You're not just a tenant. You're part of the story now, and you always will be. That night, as we sat together on our own porch, I realized how much had changed. My mother's laughter no longer stung. The whispers of the past had faded, replaced by the sound of children playing, neighbors chatting, and the quiet certainty that we belonged. Ethan took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. Do you regret any of it? He asked softly. I shook my head. Not for a second. Sometimes you have to lose everything. You thought you wanted to find what you really need. He smiled, pulling me close. Here's to $1 dreams. We watched the stars come out, the city lights twinkling in the distance, and for the first time, I felt truly at home, not just in a house, but in a life we'd built together, brick by brick, heart by heart.